Since ancient times, across the globe, in various cultures, it has been said that men are in crisis. Even if women couldn't vote, even if women couldn't work.
I think we should ban divorce too. Yeah, I think that should be banned. Yes.
Okay, well, that's a little bit silly. You have to acknowledge that, right?
No.
I'm right and you're wrong.
When people trash me, they're wrong. But when I trash you, I'm right.
I'm right and you're wrong.
Men are not meant to be dominant. Men are meant to be submissive. They're meant to be worker ants.
Forcibly ran train. We forcibly used to white girls, and we used to sneak crack in the white girls' cigarettes to fuck them.
You are a queen. They are worker ants. That's how the system is supposed to go, because men do not have the ability to think for themselves. They don't. They don't have higher intellect.
We used to do it without permission.
Be normal.
Just be normal, dude.
Please be normal.
Be normal, be normal, be normal.
Because I am normal.
So the recruitment process is, you message them on Instagram. I don't mention webcam until after I've had sex with the girl.
I've sort of concluded that men are just superior beings.
The reason men are statistically more violent than women is because of patriarchal socialization.
Patriarchy.
The patriarchy.
This is patriarchal programming at its finest, folks.
This is a patriarchal issue.
The patriarchy.
Do not go.
Patriarchy. What do you mean?
So to conclude, I'm quite skeptical with this concept of healthy masculinity or positive masculinity because I think it continues to attribute more values to a gender expression. I don't see much value in it in the context of the fight against patriarchy.
Depending on who you ask, men are either more oppressed than ever or more privileged than ever. There are other ways of looking at modern masculinity, but these two narratives are some of the loudest in media. But what is masculinity? The dictionary definition is qualities or attributes regarded as characteristic of men or boys. This definition isn't too helpful because it requires society to ascribe certain characteristics to boys and men. So let's start with the very basics. What is a man? A man is a human being. So anything regarding masculinity is going to be correlated to humanity. Same with femininity. When we see someone else drinking a cup of coffee, we can have an idea of roughly what their brew may taste like, the feeling the caffeine gives them, and we can even assume the reason why they're drinking coffee likely has to do with work, productivity, or focus. None of these assessments have to do with masculinity or femininity. There are some experiences exclusive to men or women, some societal and others biological, but we have more in common with one another than we do with, say, trees or squirrels. The polarized nature of media may have us think about humanity like this, when in reality men and women are far more similar, like this, with the overlap being humanity itself. Men and women definitely have their differences, we just focus on them more than our similarities. But outside of society, what are those differences? Biologically speaking, the biggest factor that would impact our temperaments differently is hormones. Men produce more testosterone and women produce more estrogen. Testosterone is more associated with assertiveness and aggression, while estrogen is more associated with empathy, although everyone's individual brain chemistry is different, which could explain why some women are more likely to experience things like mood swings. It could also partly explain why some men are more aggressive than others. There's definitely something to be said about falling testosterone levels in men, but this video is focused on the media's current relationship with masculinity. Here, YouTuber Ryan Beard is talking about trans people in men's and women's prisons, although the context isn't that important.
TERFs like Vanessa are afraid of having trans women in their prisons because they're afraid that trans women will attack them. However, having a penis doesn't make someone inherently more violent. The reason men are statistically more violent than women is because of patriarchal socialization. Men are socialized to be more violent.
While it's true that somebody's upbringing and their socialization will have an impact on how they behave in society, that doesn't mean socialization is the only contributing factor. To blame violence in men on patriarchal socialization is even more off the mark. For this to be true, our institutions, as in our education and our government, would have to encourage violent behavior in men in some kind of way. But the justice system is hard on violent crime unless you live in a state like California, and the likelihood of a person committing a criminal act decreases with years of education, although the probability of committing a crime like tax fraud or embezzlement actually increases with years of education. I would assume this is because these are crimes that require some level of financial success before committing them, but I digress.
Saying that people with penises are inherently more dangerous than people with vaginas because of their biology is a theory called biological essentialism, and this theory is backed by just as much scientific evidence as theories like phrenology and eugenics. No scientific evidence.
Ryan's argument about biological essentialism boils down to nature versus nurture. Nature generally refers to somebody's biology and genetics. Nurture, on the other hand, is more concerned with things like upbringing and education. When talking about such a wide-scale issue like why men are statistically more violent than women, both nurture and nature need to be taken into account, and the level of impact on these factors is going to vary from person to person. This is from the article Gender Differences of Animals from Psychology Today. Among mammals, males are generally larger and more aggressive than females. This pattern is related to greater production of testosterone that is also associated with increased aggression. There are intriguing exceptions, including hyenas and chinchillas, where the females are larger and more socially dominant. Such exceptions are sometimes related to increased testosterone production by females. So yes, our biology and our hormones do impact how we behave. That's not to say that if you're a man, you're automatically more violent, but men who aren't raised properly are going to be more predisposed to violence than women, and girls who are raised improperly are more likely to run away from home than boys. Both men and women are capable of being dangers to themselves and others, but these dangers often present themselves differently in men and women. Going back to Ryan's argument, disregarding biology entirely is not an answer to biological essentialism. Removing the concepts of biology and masculinity from the conversation about men is becoming more and more common. Take this video, Positive Masculinity is Overrated by Alice Capel, for example.
We need to stop going in circles and address the roots of the problem, which is that the formation of men's identity is systematically tied to masculinity. In his video, Big Joel said that his best advice to young men would be to do what they think is good, according to them, according to what we generally deem as good. I like the way he phrased that because he completely removed masculinity from the conversation. He talked about being a good person, not a good man.
First of all, the formation of men's identities isn't systematically tied to masculinity, it is intrinsically tied to masculinity. Our humanity came long before society as we know it today. Second of all, the video is called Positive Masculinity is Overrated, and one of her main points is to remove masculinity from the conversation about men, implying that men need to discard their masculinity and identity as a man in order to strive to become better is dehumanizing. To take it a step further, what if I told Alice that in order for her to become a better person, she needs to stop thinking of herself as a woman, discard her feminine traits, stop identifying as a feminist, and replace that feminine name with something a bit more societally convenient, like A7XC3. It's beyond insulting and offensive. It's funny because Noah Sampson, another bread tuber, has tried to make this argument as well, but with femininity and women instead, with the main difference being Noah butchers somebody else's words to make his point.
I don't understand how we're getting so off topic. This is about feminism today, whereas everybody wants to make this about their individual, here are all the multitude of other things that factor into my person. Great. This is about feminism. It's about womanhood.
Yeah, feminism and womanhood famously have nothing to do with the experiences of women. It's totally different. It's not related to it, unrelated completely. Don't worry about it. Feminism is about something else. It's not about the thing that feminism's about.
This argument could work if Noah wasn't going off of a YouTube short which removes the context of what got them off topic in the first place. So what derailed their conversation about feminism, capitalism, and men?
If you want to be in a competitive world and compete, you have to have the right mindset. And I think a lot of people blame their lack of confidence or what society tells them for the reason that they're not achieving what they need to achieve, when that's not the case. You have to have the mindset of achieving, because the men who built the world had the mindset of building it. So the women who want to engage and build that further, they need to have that same mindset.
I don't think we do. I think that's like assuming that we all want to be capitalist babies. Right. I think that men are not well adjusted in the society and women are not trying to re-embody what they have built for us.
The The woman on the right goes on to say the woman next to her is trying to push her capitalist ideology on every other woman, when all she was really saying was women should take more initiative, women should be more driven. She does make the mistake of saying men built the world in a room full of feminists, but that shouldn't be enough to derail the conversation. And yes, arguing against women building confidence and taking initiative because capitalism is derailing or stalling the conversation. When including this clip, it's likely Noah Samsen was thinking, well, it's time to make yet another video on masculinity and YouTube Shorts. Let's go to the Just Pearly Things channel, look at the shorts, and oh, this one mentions feminism. Let's make fun of this one, which is probably why he didn't bother to check for context. While Noah seems to care about femininity being removed from the conversation about women, his constant negative focus on masculinity gives me the impression he doesn't care as much about a man's personhood as he does a woman's. If I had to guess, he probably agrees with Alice's point about removing masculinity from the conversation about men, but I can't know for sure. Noah's critique of this clip continues.
I understand that all of you have your own individual experiences and the other things that feed into you as a person. That's perfectly fine. But this is where intersectionality falls off the planet and loses, I would argue, probably the vast majority of people, including me. I'm not even a feminist. I don't give a crap about feminists arguing amongst themselves about who's the most victimized. But this is annoying to listen to. I honestly I don't understand anything anybody's even trying to get at.
Intersectionality is dumb because I think it's dumb and I think it's annoying and I don't understand what you guys are saying. That is how you argue for a point. That is amazing stuff right there.
If Noah is a feminist, he just missed out on a golden piece of information offered on a silver platter. She's saying that while she understands everyone has their own problems, intersectionality and constant self-victimization are not going to appeal to the majority of people. That conversations about feminism often get a bit too abstract and esoteric. That's annoying. When hearing this, Noah could have thought, I guess there are some things that could be done to make feminism more appealing. But it seems like he's far more concerned with making a fool out of her. Noah Samsen, Optical W, you just got pranked. You just got owned. It's the exact kind of annoying behavior Sydney was talking about. Let's take a step away from modern media for a bit and look at some older examples of men and masculinity in media. The 1971 cult classic A Clockwork Orange was quite controversial. One of the film's first reviews appeared in a 1972 New Yorker article, in which film critic Pauline Kael described the film as an abhorrent viewing experience, and questioned whether audiences are gradually being conditioned to accept violence as a sensual pleasure. I don't think most people interpret the film this way. For me, the main takeaway is power demands responsibility. I'm going to be a bit vague when describing the film, both for monetization and spoiler reasons, but I will be discussing the premise of the film, so minor spoilers. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Alex, the main character, is a violent and domineering teenager. He does have a surprising amount of power and control over others, but that's only because of his vile behavior. His gross misuse of power causes those he hurts to resent him deeply, understandably so. His crew, who he causes trouble with, decides to turn on him at a rather inconvenient time, leaving Alex to be convicted of murder. In prison, he's given the choice of either staying incarcerated or an experimental treatment. He chooses the treatment, which causes him to stop in his tracks and get ill whenever he has violent thoughts. When released back into society, his newfound powerlessness enables those he's harmed to enact revenge. Once again, understandably so. When Alex had more power, he had no sense of responsibility or accountability, which led him to do awful things. But without his power or assertiveness, he is now merely prey for the rest of the world. A punching bag, a doormat. Without power, the world can chew us up and spit us out how it pleases. But without responsibility, we ruin our lives ourselves, and potentially the lives of those around us. Power itself is nothing to shy away from or be ashamed of, but it can certainly be misused. It takes both power and responsibility to thrive properly in society. These traits combined allow us to provide for our communities and ourselves. A more straightforward example of masculinity in older media is The Man Show. It was a sketch comedy show from the early 2000s which played off the dynamics between men and women. The humor is quite dated and even misogynistic, but it was specifically for the sake of laughs, not to try to teach people a lesson. I think being able to laugh at gender stereotypes for both men and women is healthy. Let's take a look at one of the sketches from the first season.
While I'm at work, what the hell does she do all day? To find out, I secretly planted some video cameras around my house and just let them roll. Now, I have not seen these yet. I want it to be a surprise. So our producers edited them down, and we're going to look at the tape now. Let's roll that if we could.
At first, it starts innocently with his wife watering the plants.
What is that, the plants? Oh, that's who's watering the plants.
But it quickly devolves into her day drinking, ordering a gun, planning to kill her husband, and cheating with 2 different guys. The punchline being, he doesn't seem all that emotionally invested in this until she eats his sandwich.
God damn it, that is my sandwich. I specifically bought that sandwich so I could eat that during the game tomorrow. Son of a bitch. Stop this tape. Stop the tape. I can't watch this anymore.
Whether or not you think this is funny isn't important. It's clear the joke is at the expense of both the husband and the wife. With A Clockwork Orange, the audience isn't meant to admire the actions of Alex. And with The Man Show, the audience isn't meant to take any of it seriously. There was a point where people were seen as mature enough to be able to handle more unsavory themes in media. But now it's far more common for media to try to appeal to all ages rather than just adults. That's good for profits, but not so much for the integrity of entertainment. In my opinion, this more sanitized media landscape has left many hungry for more offensive themes, something that people like Andrew Tate and Just Pearly Things would take advantage of, along with the lack of guidance many men struggle with today. There is a level of humor with Andrew Tate, and that's part of his appeal.
When you held his hand, you need to do the inverse flip, and then all of them running and getting on skateboards, and then skateboarding around the floor, and pretending they're doing their geeks, bruv.
But unlike The Man Show, he does want at least some people taking him seriously. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to sell a supposed pathway to his lifestyle through Hustlers University. Andrew Tate blurs the line between entertainer and self-help guru, which affords him publicity and marketability. I don't think he would have been nearly as successful if it weren't for the crisis of identity and purpose in men. There's also probably something to be said about the pushback against him boosting his media profile. The manosphere in general has been vastly popular in the last year or two. Another breakout star in that online space is Just Pearly Things.
Like, I think if a woman cheats, she's trying to leave you. If a man cheats, he's just like, it's like a handshake.
Yeah. So, I've sort of concluded that men are just superior beings. I don't think women should vote.
Huh?
I don't think women should vote.
Lord Jesus, keep on going.
Yeah, that's
no
it.
Women, you can't vote. No birth control. Keep it going.
No, because it's always freedom without responsibility.
Pearl often offers up controversial opinions which don't really seem to help men or women, but they can feel cathartic to a certain audience. These opinions are often justified in simple ways. For example, the reason why she doesn't think women should vote is because men get drafted, but drafts are rare and have more to do with geopolitical conflict than what the American people vote for, not to mention the plethora of things voting impacts that have nothing to do with military, although sometimes she doesn't even have a justification for her wild opinions.
So do you agree with that premise that slavery was embellished?
There are parts that are under embellished, and there are parts that are over embellished. I think it just depends what we're talking about.
That's so interesting. I've got to know what was over embellished about slavery.
Yeah, I just rather, I mean, I was talking about a book that I read, and I think to understand the context, you'd have to read the book.
But you just said some parts were embellished, some parts were under embellished.
I just, again.
Are you retracting that?
I'd really just rather not.
I'm sorry, I cannot picture Pearl Davis reading a book. So after giving this hot take that slavery was over-embellished, she claims Ethan Klein is engaging in bad faith.
Yeah, again, I was kind of hoping this was like a good faith interview.
Wait, what's bad faith? I'm literally showing you clips.
She claims he has an agenda, which, even if true, probably not as much of an agenda as Pearl.
What about this interview has been bad faith?
I just think you're kind of trying to push an agenda.
She tries to claim she was taken out of context, which isn't the case.
5 minutes before I say Sowell talks about this in his book. So I'm communicating in the interview that I'm quoting an author.
You're not being honest.
She says that's not what her channel is about, even though it's something she talked about on her channel.
Why are you bringing this up when that's not really what my channel's about?
And then she finally offers a weak explanation before clamming up again.
I think that certain slaves had good relationships with their owners. Not all, maybe not most, but I think some did.
And that just
and there are accounts of them saying this.
So some slaves had good relationships with their masters. Therefore,
And
slavery was
this is what
embellished?
you know how this is gonna go for me. Like, I don't know why you're doing this. You know I can't have this conversation without them painting it a certain way.
Well, just own it then. Just do it. Just say what you want. You know what I mean? Just be red-pilled about it.
And then says Ethan is weird for doing research before a debate and says they're like Abba and Preach. She tries to use cancellation as a reason as to why she can't talk about this. But she's not talking about being deplatformed. She's talking about backlash. If a big part of your business is having controversial opinions around touchy subjects, then naturally there's going to be backlash from time to time. It's not even the hot take on slavery that upsets me so much, it's more so the fact she's not willing to engage with the conversation, especially after trying to use bad faith as an argument. There's nothing in her behavior that leads me to believe she's some sort of competent thought leader regarding masculinity. But then, who is? For me, personally, Ryan Holiday has had a tremendous impact on my life. I really like his channel, Daily Stoic, and I highly recommend checking out his conversations with Robert Greene. But men will have different perceptions of their own masculinity. If you want to be an engineer, look to great engineers. If you want to be a scientist, look to great scientists. As far as I can tell, the people talking about masculinity, both on the right and the left, aren't really worth listening to. Like many things that have been politicized today, division and discontentedness drives viewership. We shouldn't discard or be ashamed of our masculinity or ignore biology outright, but we also shouldn't be so rigid with our worldview. The best of masculinity comes from developing ourselves, our skill sets, our courage. It's not the easy thing to do, but the right thing to do. Alright, that's gonna have to do it for this one. Shout out to the best subscriber squad in all of YouTube. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Well, I'll just grab my things so that you can drive me into town.